Hello and welcome to my paper crafting channel. My name's Elizabeth and today I'm going to be sharing with you 12 days of inspiration. Now these cards have been designed for a paper crafting group on Facebook called Paper Crafting with Strawberry Moon Designs, and these are 12 card designs that I have created specifically for posting at Christmas time. However, you can adapt them and use them throughout the year, but they are based on 4x6 cards, and I have used the new vintage Christmas downloads which will be available from Highlight Crafts. I will leave you the link for the Facebook group and Highlight Crafts below. First of all, I'm going to share with you a few of the products that I'm using for this set of 12 cards. So first of all, I'm using the Love Forever circular and floral dies, and again these are from Highlight Crafts, and I'm using these as rosette toppers. Then I've got a set of plain circular dies ranging from 1 inch to 2 inch, and a set of banner dies measuring 1 inch through to 3 inches. You can use strips of paper instead if you prefer. The craft supplies I'm using include a range of sequins in greens and reds. I've also got some old star confetti, and I will pull out the red for the projects. I've got my trusted crocodile that I use to round off the corners, a red and green pen. I'm using the wide nib on these, and these will edge my papers. To add a vintage feel, I'm using Vintage Photo, a distress oxide. I'm using some glossy, then to add dimension to my card, I'm using 1mm thick foam tape. I'm using wet glue for the majority of my sticking, and I'm using white card bases for every card. Here I'm also sharing with you a sneak peek of all of the paper designs on the new vintage Christmas download. I'll leave you the details below, but you can see how versatile this range of papers are. I don't have any digital editing program, so instead I use my printer and I resize by creating more copies on one A4 page. So here you have the A4 page. If you add 2 copies, you end up with A5, and so on, all the way down through to the smallest thumbnails that you can use as elements. So in that way I can print down to A6 by adding 4 copies, and these are what I've been using for this particular set of cards. It's worth having a look at your printer settings and making them work for you so you get the most for your money. So here I've got a sheet of the A4 sentiments that I have cut down in preparation using my tag dies and my circle dies. Some of them have been printed onto sticker paper, and again this makes it easier to create a batch of sentiments in one go. And then I've also fussy cut out a wide range of the toppers and elements. Here you can see the wide range of vintage photos, the floral arrangements. You've got little angels, you've got a little lady who I call Marilyn, and then I've also printed off a couple of sheets of the tags, so there's plenty to work with. Now we have the tools, I will show you how to make each one of the Vintspiration cards. So the first card is using the candy cane stripes, and I'll remind you once again that I'm working with 4x6 cards, and I have printed the papers down so the proportions are the equivalent of A6. So I printed 4 sets on one sheet of A4 paper. I'm beginning with one green tapestry tag, and I've cut down 4 bands from the candy cane paper, and these will be edged with the thick nibbed red pen. I do this to add a very slim border to the paper. It's a really clean and crisp finish, and it covers the white lines. So be bold with your strokes, just go for it and run the side of the nib directly down the edge of the paper. I'm going to do the same again with an olive green pen, just to add that finishing touch. With this style of card, I prefer to use a T ruler to help me line up, but some of it I also do by eye. It's entirely up to you how precise you want to be with your measurements. I'm going to cut the longer tag in half, and the snips will be hidden behind the floral topper, and then I will be ready to adhere the candy cane rectangles. When I'm ready to stick the card together, I hold it in place with a little piece of Scotch removable tape, and then I place the T ruler at the corner of the card. I'm going to bring in the bottom band first, and then I will use the right angle of the T ruler to help me place each one of the rectangles. Part is entirely up to you, but I prefer curved edges on these cards, so I have rounded off the base card, and I am also adding rounded corners to the top 2 corners and the bottom 2 corners, and then I'm using wet glue to carefully add all of the banners in the portrait position on this 4x6 card. The green banner is in place, so now it's time to hide my workings with the red glitter topper. I like a little bit of dimension on these cards, so I'm using lightweight 1mm foam tape, and I'm edging each of the toppers with the vintage photo ink, and then I'm adding the wreath sentiment. The border at the bottom is slightly too wide, so all I'm doing here is using my paper trimmer to take a slither or two off the bottom edge. When that's done, we've got our first card, and you can see that it's pretty similar to the original prototype. But now we'll move on to Vintspiration card number 2. When making festive cards and batch making, I like to keep things clean and simple. And although I'm sticking to the same layout, I'm using different papers here. I've opted for this very pretty pale blush background, And then I'm using the oddments of the green tapestry and the floral edged festive papers along with a burgundy topper. I'll add the sentiment later. The 4x6 card base is set in place with removable tape. I'm going to edge the rounded corners again with the red thick tip pen. Then I'm ready to bring in the banners, and this time I'm placing the floral topper slightly higher so that I can still see the wording. To add a vintage feel, I'm adding some vintage photo brown ink, and again I'm raising the dimension by adding 1mm foam tape to the back of the main panel. I prefer to add a little bit of wet glue to the foam tape to give me a little bit of wiggle room, and then I'm using the wet glue again to place in the narrow banner to the left of the card. The wider floral banner is placed centrally, and again I'm adding the red floral topper slightly higher, so although it's the same card design, each time it will look different depending on the papers that you're using. And I like the versatility of being able to work in this way. To finish off this particular card, I'm using 3 ruby red sequins, and these are placed in a wonky triangle to draw your eye around the main elements of the card. And here you have 2 versions of Vintspiration card number 2. Moving swiftly on to card number 3. The majority of these cards were made after I had created a set of DT cards for the launch of Vintage Christmas, so you'll see that I've got lots of scraps and lots of narrow strips, so you can use every element that you print out. Here I'm using the extra elements of the red tapestry paper for my banners, and then I've got the larger floral edged paper for my background and some red glitter card. Instead of the vintage car, I'm going to decide upon another element. You may choose with this design to take the entire strip and layer them one after the other from the left hand side. I'm trying to add a little design feature here, and instead of securing the entire strip, I'm leaving a gap in between. So I'm using my T ruler to line up the longer strips at the top, and then these are cut away, and then I use the T ruler again to leave myself about half an inch gap, and I'm lining up the bottom again. If you prefer, you can add all of them in one go, but I'm taking away the bulk and I'm giving myself just a small gap in between the vertical strips. Then I'm going to bring in the red glitter strip, and this will be stuck down horizontally in that 1/4 of an inch gap. Now these are in place, I'm going to try out some of the toppers. You can see that there's a wide variety in the elements, and I plumped for the holly berry wreath. I'm edging it with Vintage Photo brown ink, and this time I'm going to use some Pinflair 3D glue gel to add some dimension to the element on the front of the card. Once I'm happy with the front panel, I'm going to corner the edges and add some more Vintage Photo brown ink just to tie everything together before adding it to the front of my 4x6 card. Then I'm adding the 3 red sequins, and again I'm looking at the main element of the card, which is the holly topper, and the sequins will be placed around this focal point. We now have 2 versions of Vintspiration card number 3 onto card number 4. This time I'm using larger panels, so we've got the Marilyn background paper, the red tapestry, and one of the panels that include a line of Christmas cards that I want to feature on this particular card. So I'm adding the panel first, including the 1mm foam tape, and I'm going to edge this using the olive green marker pen. I'm bringing in the same colour designs with the green pen to the trees, and then I'm adding this particular panel with a little bit of wet glue before layering up each one of the elements. As mentioned before, these cards have been made for paper crafting with Strawberry Moon, and my intention is to share one card every day on the group starting on Wednesday the 16th of October, and I would love to see your versions of these card layouts. They would need to feature the Strawberry Moon designs, but you can bling them up. You can use craft card as your base. It can be your version of these templates. The main thing is to inspire you to get cracking with your festive cards, and by making them small enough you'll be able to overcome the high postage costs that we now have here in the UK. So as I finish off this card with these 3 sequins, you can see that I've used the star themed wreath this time. So again we've got the trees as the focal point, and although we've got the same template, we've got 2 very different looking cards. Now we move on to Vintspiration card number 5. This card layout features 4 offset rectangles, and again I'm going to begin by adding the card to the mat with some removable tape. Then I'm going to bring in the 1mm foam tape to add dimension to the background. The length of the top 2 rectangles remains the same, but the width will be slightly different, and the same rule applies to the bottom 2 rectangles. For example, this green rectangle measures 1¼ inches by 3¼ and the right corner rectangle measures 2 inches by 3¼ The bottom right rectangle measures 1¼ by 2 inches, and the bottom left corner will be a 2x2 square. I'm adding ink to the sentiment, so you can see here that you can make it totally vintage by covering the whole of the sentiment topper, and if you prefer you can use a craft card base instead of the white card, so you can see the different and the variations that you can experiment with. We'll add the background mat with the foam tape and a little bit of wet glue, and then we're ready to bring in the rectangles. So we've got round about 1/4 of an inch border around each one of these. I tend to line them up by eye, but by all means bring in the trusty T ruler again. So we'll line these up. You can see that they're slightly offset, and then I'm going to add some more vintage photo to an outsized vintage wreath, and again I'm bringing dimension in with a little bit of foam tape, and then I will add the sentiment with the wet glue. I enjoy adding the final embellishments, including a wide range of coloured sequins, and off camera I do add the white stickles to the holly berries and various other floral elements. And here you have the 2 finished cards. Moving on to card number 6. We are halfway through the 12 days of Vintspiration. Card making doesn't have to be complicated, and this card in particular is fairly simple and good for a beginner. The main focus are the elements from the digital downloads. So I'm adding foam tape to the back of the paper and complementing the fir trees by using a green olive edge. I'm bringing in a little tartan strip, cutting away the excess and then adding this panel to the base of my 4x6 card. I changed my mind on the sentiment, so rather than adding the red vintage banner, I opted for a simpler sentiment, and then again I used some Pinflair 3D glue gel for the Santa Claus. This time I wanted to feature the wording at the top and the fir trees, and you can see just how versatile these templates can be. So they really are a good starting point if you're not sure how to use your scraps, or you need a little boost with your card templates. Then the 12 days of Vintspiration will certainly add some new designs. There we have the 2 final cards, and now we're ready for card number 7. Card number 7 features the journal pages from the digital downloads, and again I'm securing my base card and then rounding off the corners, and then I'm bringing in one of the designs from the journal pages, which features this very picturesque stag. So that is creating an edge to the left hand side. This time the card will be more vintage, so I'm adding the vintage photo inks to all of the elements, the background papers, the 3 tags and the toppers. The tags were cut ahead of time, but you will see that I do cut these down so that the ends are hidden underneath the topper. But first I'll add the foam tape with a little bit of wet glue to my background, and then again I'm going to look at the designs already on the paper. So on the original card the tags were quite low down, but because I want to still see the stag, the tags will be slightly higher up on the card base. I'm cutting them down so that they're hidden, and I've used a variety of patterns and designs to add extra interest. plenty of wet glue on the red glitter card, and then I'm going to use some wet glue and some foam tape to raise up the sentiment. There will be more inspiration using these collections at the end of this video, so please do like and subscribe and carry on watching. I'm bringing in some very old star confetti here, so you can find your embellishments in party shops and use old beads or buttons. It really is up to you to use your scraps the best way you know how. Now, card number 8 really began life as a winter birthday card because my daughter Claudette celebrates her birthday on the 21st of December. So even though these cards are for the festive period, they can be adapted to create birthday cards as well. So back to this card, I'm going in with a small panel to add some interest to the background, and again I'm rounding off those corners and adding some vintage photo ink just to knock back the colour a little bit, and I will add the same ink to 3 of these die cut rosettes cut from the Love Forever dies. The little lady who I call Marilyn will be the focal point of one of the rosettes, and then I'm using a mixture of striped paper for the tags, some blush rose plain background, and then a sentiment. Again, I'm adding foam tape, and I should say it's not strictly necessary, particularly if you want your cards to be as flat as possible for sending. But I do love the dimension that it brings to these simple designs. I'm adding the circle toppers to the rosettes, and then I will try 2 or 3 variations to see the preferred layout. I swapped out the sentiment here, and that's the beauty of being able to print your own papers, that you can adapt the designs as you go along. The trio of toppers are laid with the wet glue, and then I'm going to bring in the stripy tags and just tuck them underneath the rosettes while they're still wet. Once again I'm going to bring in the ruby red sequins just to draw your eye around the finished card, and I think this particular card ended up being one of my favourites. You can see again just how different you can make each card template look. Now we're moving on to card number 9, and here I'm bringing in 2 triangles to edge the corners of the card. These 2 cards in particular look so different because of the papers that I've used, and the trick to this is to use the designs to your advantage by cutting along the vertical corners based upon the design of the paper. On card number 1 I added the triangles in the left and right hand corners, and on card number 2 I end up adding the card from the top right corner to the lower left hand corner, and this was because the designs worked better on the panel in these areas. So again, the card templates are here for you as inspiration, but please do use the paper designs to suit the cards that you're making. I'm adding the foam tape to the finished panel, and then again this will be added to the 4x6 card, and this time I'm using some white glitter card to lift up the colours of the little girl on the topper. And again the sequins will be tied in, so because we're using pinks and whites on this particular card, I will bring in some pale white sequins. It's a nice little detail and it's relatively cheap to do. So all I'm doing is adding the detail and drawing your eye around the card. See how different the two cards look. Moving on to card number 10. And this time I'm using the tags that are another download within the Vintage Christmas set. This background is a particular favourite. It's the musical sheet in the journal files, and I'm still using up the scraps, so I'm tying in the colours of the background with the green tapestry and the green checked elements. It's a shame to cover up the musical notes, but I can always print it again. I'm using the olive green to edge all of the elements, and I'm using the red robin tag as my focal point. You know by now that we're adding foam tape to the background panel, and I'm also going to use it on the glitter topper. So now the background panel is securely in place. I'm working from the left hand side. I'm adding an extra strip of green paper to the panel and then lining up with a small border on the left, bringing in the smaller rectangle, lining it up centrally, and then bringing in the horizontal strip before adding the red tag. The gold floral topper will sit nicely to the right hand corner, and then all I need to do is to add the final sentiment element. I'm mixing up the colour palette here, so I'm bringing in green sequins, and this will nicely finish off card number 10. Card number 11 features several of the tag dies, so you can make these yourself by cutting down the strips and then creating fishtails, but I have used an old set of dies and I cut several elements from a wide range of the offcuts. I took some time to lay out these tags to work out how they would work when lined up against the Christmas tree. I don't want to hide the Christmas tree, but I also need to balance out the card so the longest tag will sit to the opposite corner of the Christmas tree. Once all the elements are inked up, I'm using wet glue to add the tags. The two longer tags will be raised up using the foam tape. So to begin with, I'm adding the smaller tags with wet glue, and these will overlap one another and work at different angles. And then once these are in place, I'm going back in with the foam tape on two of the longer panels, And by doing this, you're adding a little design feature to what appears to be a very simple card. Once the panels are securely in place, I'm bringing in the stars again, and this time I'm imagining that the stars are falling down from the sky. So although they're in a triangle, they are acting as if they are falling down to earth. And it's these little touches that really do make your simple card stand out. Last but not least, we have stunning card number 12. And again, based upon the papers, you can make two very different cards based on one card design. By now, I'm sure you can see that I'm making the vintage Christmas papers work for me, and these templates are there merely as guidelines. So this time I want to feature the wreath at the top of this card, and I also want to see some of the wording in the bottom. So this time the panel is going at the top. I'm keeping the paper ribbons in relatively the same position, and the two rosettes will go in the top third of the card. Please carry on watching the video, because if you've made it this far, I'm sure you will be interested in seeing more of the original projects that I made for the launch of Vintage Christmas by Strawberry Moon Designs. Once again, please do head over to the Paper Crafting with Strawberry Moon Facebook group. We are a mixed bunch of paper crafters, and the design team and myself are there to inspire you to get card making and to create mixed media projects, journals, albums, and so much more using these beautiful designs. So as I wrap up the 12 days of Vintspiration, just another quick reminder that I will be adding daily posts with the dimensions for each one of the card panels, and I will also add them to a specially written blog post to accompany this video. I'm finishing off the 12 cards of Vintspiration with green sequins, and before you go, I would quickly like to show you the two sets of cards side by side. Here's the original design sheet, and on the right hand side we've got the original cards, and on the left hand side you can see the cards that I have created in today's video. Every single card is different, and I'm pleased to say that I now have 24 beautiful cards all ready to send in the first week of December. Please do let me know in the comments below your favourite designs. I think that it's amazing how differently each card design can look dependent on the colour palette that you use, the background papers, and indeed the embellishments. I have also added white stickles to the details, as you can see here on Santa's beard and on the fir trees. It's a great way to use the digital downloads and to make use of all of the various scraps and design details. One final thing to show you, these are the original projects that I made as prototypes for Vintage Christmas, and they feature the same elements that I have used today. So here is a little mini cloche that I created a scene in, so you can see the vintage car, And some of these elements you will be able to see on the Highlight Crafts craft channel for the launch of this particular digital collection. I used a oval tin, and inside I created a set of oval tags, like a tag book. So here I'm using more of the sentiments and the background papers and the tags. This is a nice way of displaying the papers. And then I decorated the front with my favourite Marilyn icon and edged the tin itself with some adhesive pearls. There's never enough time on the launch days to show all the details of these projects, and they do take a number of hours to make. The reason why I share these videos is mainly so that I can remind myself of all of the designs and projects that I have created, and if they also inspire you, then that makes me super happy. This is a rectangular gift box of cards, and again you can see all of the various papers that I've used to decorate it. And this particular set of cards use some Tim Holtz dies, and I've worked with the triangular corner elements just to enhance some of the details. As you know by now, I'm all about using the paper scraps, and you can see how I have finished off each one of the cards with a coordinating envelope and a little sentiment sticker. Plus, every card has got a decorative inside. Next, I made a journal book, and this is using the journal pages that you can create an A5 book with. The tags and the elements come in handy not only to decorate the pages, but you can add tuck spots and add your own notes and really make this little book your own. You could use it as a festive recipe book, or you could use it to create your own Christmas lists and things to do. It's however you want to use all of the papers and the elements. Last but not least, I printed the designs on A4 paper, so the backgrounds and the elements are much larger on this set of cards, and I incorporated cutting dies from my own stash of Anna Marie and Spellbinders and Tim Holtz. And you can see that once again these cards look completely different dependent on the elements that you're using, the layers of the background papers. I've pulled in some vintage music paper and some red MDF stars. We've got Spellbinders dies here with the tags. Every single card looks different, and it's completely up to you what designs you want to use in your Christmas card making in 2024. A few weeks ago I incorporated some of these designs into the later design team projects for Highlight Crafts, but I thought you would like to see the process that I use when I am creating various cards and home decor pieces. That just about covers all my designs and inspiration for Vintage Christmas. I do hope that you have enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell for future crafting with Elizabeth Hogarth designs. Thank you for joining me today, and I look forward to welcoming you back for more crafting fun soon. Take care. Bye bye for now.